Is it really World Autism Awareness Week, or is it World I'm so bloomin' tired week? Or are they the same thing? Scientists remain baffled. Hello, can you see me yet? Are you aware of me? This is the 1 month you have to see me. Apart from that one day in the autumn where I get to be visible because it's like Bi Visibility Day. Look at me with my 2 pinpoints of visibility queer privilege. Well, welcome to Queerly Autistic. My name is Erin. I am queer, I am autistic, and I like to talk about things in an autistically queer way. And this is my fridge. It's making lots of noise today. I don't have anywhere else to film. I'm really sorry. I'll do better next time. Failing at every attempt of being a YouTuber. So, it is World Autism Awareness Week / day, hopefully when this comes out, / month. Whatever it is, the one thing I do know is that it's a really, really difficult, exhausting, challenging, tiring time to be autistic in this world, particularly in this world on the internet openly talking about being autistic. Because it so often pans out that it's a load of non-autistic people spending a whole month talking about autistic people in terms that autistic people haven't agreed to, and using terminology and kind of mythology that autistic people just don't like because it's dehumanising. Whether that's the tragedy narrative or the "oh, it's a superpower" narrative. What I really want is a "you're a human being and we're listening to you" narrative. But apparently their awareness doesn't stretch that far. They are aware of me, but vaguely. And only in the terms that they deem fit to be aware of me. There's never that middle ground or space in between where autistic people can just exist as people with all the different facets of being people. There's actually a movement within the autistic community and our allies that has picked up speed over the last couple of years to change this from World Autism Awareness Week or month to World Autism Acceptance Week or month. And this is, without a doubt, a definite improvement. But there are still some sort of issues and biases in the language around acceptance as well as awareness, despite it being a step up from the travesty that is awareness. So what I'm going to do is just have a look at the whole problem around autism awareness, the language of awareness, and how autism awareness often pans out in reality. I'm then going to talk about the movement to change it to acceptance. I'm going to talk about the benefits of that. And then I'm also going to have a look at the issues that I have and that I've seen other people voice with that particular framing. And maybe at the end of it, I'll be able to come to some sort of conclusion on what's the best way to deal with this and what we need to be doing and what language is best for us as a community. Now that's just going to be my opinion because I don't speak for the entire community. I speak for me and base it on some discussions I've had over the years and over the weeks and months. So please do not take what I'm saying as this is what the autistic community thinks. I am me. I am an Erin. I am not the autism overlord. I'm just Erin. I'm just a little queer autistic trying her best. So, to start, let's look at autism awareness. Yay! The main issue with autism awareness as a concept is that it was not created by, nor is it led by, autistic people. Often the voices of parents, carers and professionals get elevated during the month of April, more so than they normally do, and often it is couched in sort of tragedy and hardship terminology, without actually giving the microphone to autistic people to talk about what they need. And because of that, the conversation never seems to get past, please acknowledge that this exists, although it does occasionally like to dip into, please acknowledge how hard my life is because of autism. Ergo, autism equals my autistic child. But this awareness, and awareness in general, does nothing in terms of actually getting the structural and cultural and societal change that autistic people desperately need in order to live the lives that we deserve. And the reason for this is that autistic people are not front and centre of these awareness campaigns. How can you fight for what we need when you're not giving us space on the platform to step up to the mic and make those demands about what we need? Autistic mistrust of autism awareness comes from a very real place of lived experience around betrayal and mistrust for the organisations that often lead the charge around autism awareness at this time of year. For example, Light It Up Blue, which you'll see a lot over the course of the month as a way to raise awareness of autism. Side note, but have you noticed that it's always raising awareness of autism and not raising awareness of autistic people? The separation of our humanity from our autism seems to be really key here. Anyway, Light It Up Blue was conceived by Autism Speaks, the biggest autism charity in the US, which is viewed by many autistic people and our allies as a hate group. I'll pop some links in the description that go into more detail about why Autism Speaks is so bad, but let's just say eugenics, cures, autism is tragedy, bleh. And even worse, the reason why they specifically chose Light It Up Blue was because they wanted to raise awareness of the fact that it was more of a boy's condition. Ew. I'm sure we'll do a whole video at some point around gendering autism and the medical biases that lead to people who are perceived as girls being misdiagnosed. But for the meantime, I just want to reiterate, ew. In 2015, the National Autistic Society, which is the biggest autism charity in the UK and has a bucket load of its own problems, which we will dip our toes into a little bit later, commissioned some research that, despite their flaws, I think really illustrates the issue with awareness. They reported that 99.5% of people in the UK had heard of autism. This means that, more or less, we're all aware of autism. Autism awareness has arrived. However, this doesn't mean the public understands autism. 73% of autistic people and 60% of their families told us that they changed their own behaviour to reduce the chance of intolerance from the public. You can be aware of something that you deem a nuisance and still see it as a nuisance. It's along the lines of, see, I'm aware of why you act the way you do, but I still don't like it and I would prefer that you stop. I think another of the fundamental problems with the concept of autism awareness is in the language of awareness itself. Awareness is defensive. It's about protecting yourself from a threat and being alert for any threats that might come towards you. We don't speak of awareness in terms of good things. And whilst it makes sense to put things like cancer or road safety under the umbrella of awareness, to put being autistic in the same bag as that is deeply insulting and feeds a narrative that hurts autistic people every day. I think awareness to me strikes that same uncomfortable chord as tolerance, because you don't tolerate good things. You tolerate things you'd rather not be there, but you decide that you can live with. A few years ago, I attended a hate crime vigil in Trafalgar Square, and one of the speakers was Stuart Milk, who is actually the nephew of the famous gay politician Harvey Milk. And he said some things in his speech that have resonated with me through the years, and I think are very, very relevant now. He said, "I don't want tolerance. You tolerate mosquitoes. We're not mosquitoes. We're butterflies and we should be celebrated." He was talking about LGBTQIA+ people, but I think this is equally as applicable to autistic people and other neurodivergent and disabled people. And that's the issue with Autism Awareness Month. I don't feel particularly celebrated right now. We're, 2 days, 3 days into this thing, and I am exhausted. I am wiped out. I have spent days reading people talking about mourning their child, talking about how hard it is to raise a child like me, how my existence is inherently tragic. And when I try and call this out, I get incessantly tone policed by people saying that I need to be nicer and kinder because these parents are human beings. They are humans, they are fallible, and I need to understand where they're coming from. But there's no attempt to give me the same treatment, to say, oh, I see why you're angry and why maybe you're a little bit snappy in your tone, because you're a human, you're fallible, you're coming from a place of experience and trauma and recognizing that something is harming you. It has been a couple of days, as I said, and I've already had all of this. Other autistic people I know have had arguably even more. And I am so tired. I do not feel celebrated. I do not feel like a butterfly. I feel like a mosquito, and maybe even worse than that, because I'm not sure I even feel tolerated at this point. And that's why autism awareness, both as a concept and as the thing it has become, is outdated and exhausting and harmful. And as something that we have to go through every year, it's simply not acceptable and it needs to be changed. And there is a push to change it. And one of the biggest pushes to change it is to switch from autism awareness to autism acceptance. So what is autism acceptance and how is it different from the concept of autism awareness? The conversation around this has been bubbling away in the autistic community for quite a few years, and I think that the basis of it is incredibly sound and incredibly positive. Acceptance is the step beyond awareness that actually creates real material change in people's lives. It's that step beyond, I'm aware of why you're acting this way, but what can I do to help you stop acting this way? Which ties into ideas around ABA and compliance training, and moves away from that and into, I am aware of why you act like this, and I also accept you as the person who acts like this. It's miles ahead of awareness, and it's the kind of thing that autistic people have been crying out for way too long. It's far more rooted in the sense of identity, of I am autistic rather than I have autism. It's the idea that autism is not this thing that you carry around with you, that you've been burdened with, but is an inextricable part of who you are. You don't need to be aware of that, you need to accept it, because this is who that person is. In 2020, Erin Bullis and Abby Sesterka, who were both diagnosed as adults, wrote an article in Psychology Today arguing that autism awareness isn't enough and making a case for a shifting more towards an autism acceptance model. The whole article is brilliant and I'll be linking it in the description box, but there's one quote that really stood out for me that I'd like to share with you now. Awareness is simple and fleeting. It is merely the beginning of the journey. When working therapeutically with autistic clients and their loved ones, we must start from a place of building awareness and then quickly move on to promote acceptance and understanding. The act of being aware does little to enact change in and of itself. Sometimes an increase in awareness of autism in oneself or a loved one can even evoke negative feelings, because awareness without acceptance allows stigma, stereotypes, and negative assumptions to linger beneath the surface and negatively impact how we perceive ourselves and others. Until society as a whole shifts from awareness to acceptance, autistic people and their families will continue to be impacted by and potentially internalise negative attitudes and stigma that currently prevail in the wider conversation about autism. I don't think a lot of people who use autism awareness are using it in bad faith or that they have bad intentions, but at the end of the day, intention isn't the thing that matters, it's impact. We talked about this when we talked about Sia's film. You can have the best of intentions, but if you cause harm, you still cause harm. You can accidentally tread on my toe whilst doing something that you think is helping me, And you can apologise, you can tell me that you didn't mean to do it. But at the end of the day, my toe is still broken and it hurts. And I'm allowed to be cross about that, and I'm allowed to want to do something to stop it hurting. There's a real sense that autism acceptance just brings more to the table than autism awareness, not least because it's something that autistic people have come together and discussed and put together ourselves. So it's out of the hands of those big organisations that we have so much mistrust for. This isn't something that's been foisted upon us by people who are not autistic. This is something that autistic people have sat down and looked at and said, no, this is what we need, this is what we want, and we are going to demand those things. So to move more mainstream towards acceptance and away from awareness would be a huge victory for the autistic community and could spark a cultural change in how we talk about autism as a society. However, the idea of autism acceptance replacing autism awareness isn't completely infallible. There are still some issues with it in terms of the language and in terms of the execution. A lot of people in the community, and I can completely understand why and do agree with them in a lot of points, argue that it really doesn't go far enough. That moving from autism awareness to autism acceptance would be like settling for people being okay with who we are, rather than that celebration that we talked about with Stuart Milk's comments. There is a level of when you think about acceptance, you think about accepting things that you can't change, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're happy about that thing. I will accept the fact that I have to work from 9 to 5 every day, but that doesn't change the fact that working from 9 to 5 every day mentally exhausts me. I accept it because I have to, but I don't celebrate it. And that's where it does fall short in some areas. I am a huge proponent of looking at things in the most radical way, of saying just making baby steps, just chipping away around the edges is not enough. We need to make bigger changes, we need to think bigger, we need to be paving the way for something that is much better than this, rather than just tinkering with something that really doesn't work anyway. Additionally, we've seen that organisations that created the autism awareness model are now proclaiming publicly to be moving more towards the acceptance model, but not in a real way that goes beyond PR and optics. A lot of them are shifting towards these more progressive labels and language without actually making the internal change to move them away from that autism awareness, that fear, that threat, that tragedy model. For example, Autism Speaks very rarely now talks about finding a cure or talks about autism as some sort of terrible disease that must be fought. But when you look at the inner workings of it, a lot of its money is still going towards research, towards a cure, or at least to finding the autism gene, which would inevitably then lead to looking for how to cure it or eradicate it. Just a few years ago, they tried to elevate this progressive image by having a hashtag that was autism is, where they encouraged people to talk about autism in all its facets. But in the press release that they sent out with the hashtag, they referred to autism as a disease, which kind of goes against the very thing you're proclaiming to do and really gives away what you're actually thinking behind all those more progressive words. Even organisations like the National Autistic Society, which produced the research that we quoted earlier, they very much have taken more steps in terms of accepting a more progressive and accepting model of thinking about autism, particularly publicly, but when you look into it, there's still a massive issue of ABA and compliance therapy being used in their services and schools. So they've not moved as far away as you would think. They may talk about celebrating autism and understanding and acceptance, even if they still use the World Autism Awareness Week title. They very much try to frame that under that is acceptance and celebration. But then if you look in their job listings very recently, they were looking to employ an ABA or Applied Behavioural Analysis therapist for their services. And the point of ABA is to train the autism out of the child to make them more neurotypical. It's also something that has caused PTSD in a vast number of autistic adults who went through it as children. And that's not necessarily the fault of changing it to autism acceptance, because I think whatever it was changed to, they would try to get in underneath it, and we just have to be aware of it. But because the conversation has centred on autism acceptance as a remodelling of April and everything around it for so long, it's something that they've been able to kind of latch themselves onto in order to try and create this more progressive idea of themselves. It's also something that they can play with because the wording could be incredibly good, or it could be very much that tolerating thing again. So they can use this terminology in a way that doesn't necessarily mean that they're lying about what they want, if that makes sense. They can say, we do push autism acceptance. Look, we celebrate autism, but we also accept it. That doesn't mean that we can't try and tweak it a little bit. I think however we look to change the terminology from World Autism Awareness, whether that's to acceptance or something else, this is something that we need to be really aware of, and we need to be holding these organisations to account for, that they can't just drape themselves in the flag like organisations do during Pride. They put a rainbow pride flag on, but they don't actually do the work in the internal workings of their organisations to make those organisations actually work for autistic people. A lot of autism organisations use World Autism Awareness Week and April in general as fundraising opportunities. So you may find yourself seeing a lot of requests for donations and may think the best thing to do would be to donate to a charity. However, I would probably advise against that unless you are absolutely certain in the knowledge that that organisation is autistic-led and is actively supporting autistic liberation and justice and pride and empowerment. I'll provide some links in the description for such organisations because it can be very hard to find them in the big melting pot of autism organisations that don't do that. I think the best way to get involved as an ally during April is to support autistic people on an individual basis. Whether it's signing up to people's Patreons, buying from autistic-owned independent businesses and shops, donating to crowdfunders, just sending them a little bit of money through Ko-Fi, it's a much better way of directly supporting autistic people than those donations to big charities do. I actually started a thread on Twitter a couple of days ago, which I've been completely overwhelmed by responses with. It's amazing. And in there, people have left all of their details for donations or where they sell things or their Patreons. And I'm going to link that in the description box because I think that is how you be the best ally during April. So there we go. Autism Awareness Month has begun and I am already tired. There's a reason I'm wearing this t-shirt. My boobs tell the truth. My boobs, they do not lie. Ooh, if you're interested in this t-shirt, I will pop the link to the shop in the description box. It is autistic owned and there are lots of amazing designs. They also have an Autistics Against Fascism one, which I also own and you may see on this channel at some point. So go and check them out. They're awesome, but you will want to buy 37 items. So be warned. Thank you so much for watching. I'm aware that maybe we didn't come to any concrete conclusions other than autism awareness bad, which I think is, a good enough conclusion, but that's why this is an active discussion. Personally, I wouldn't be too disappointed if we were able to get that change from autism awareness to autism acceptance, because either way it's a step in the right direction. So there we go. Autism Awareness Month video done. I'm tired. I'm very tired. I tried having slightly less of a script so I had more points rather than kind of whole sentences written out for this, and I've quite enjoyed just being able to waffle a bit more than I have been in previous videos. We'll see what it looks like when I actually get down to edit it, and my poor friend Jen having to caption this, I do apologise. I will send you lots of chocolate. If you've enjoyed my ramblings, you can follow me on social media. I'm on Twitter at queerlyautistic, and I have a website which is queerlyautistic.com. I also have a book coming out this month on the 21st of April, which is just... It's called Queerly Autistic, the ultimate guide for LGBTQIA+ teens on the spectrum. It is a guide that's aimed at young autistic people, but I think could be useful for parents or for older people or for non-autistic teenagers or even young adults, in terms of figuring out your sexuality and gender, coming out, finding a place in the community, having safe sex, having safe relationships, noticing abuse. Everything that you can think of, I've tried to include in here. All of the things that would have made my life as a queer autistic teenager just a little bit easier and make a little bit more sense. So it is available for pre-order. I'll provide links in the description, and we do almost have the audiobook version finished, so that will be linked to when it's available as well. So yeah, order my book. It took me 2 years to write. Thank you again for all of your support. Thank you for watching, and never forget to be proudly autistic, to be proudly queer, and to be proudly you. Mwah.